I am unashamed. What about you?
So welcome back to Unashamed. Jase says we're in our boxes because I'm in Southern Lair, Zach's in North Carolina. We're post Thanksgiving. We were off a couple of days. I know this releases in December, but we're just after Thanksgiving, and I'm looking at the table that usually I'm sitting at across from you, and I'm seeing nothing but your coffee. What does it mean?
I got my coffee, my phone, and I borrowed
a Bible.
Yeah,
no Bible.
I showed up to a spiritual battle unarmed, although I do have the Holy Spirit. But in the spirit of my dad and the resurrection, I'm fixed to confiscate this Bible right behind my, I guess it'd be behind my right shoulder. And so I think that's kind of profound.
Well, in your defense, as you're getting your Bible, I'll tell the audience in Jase's defense, he's going on a hunting trip, Zach, and because there's no water in Louisiana, and we just started getting a little wet weather, so he's having to go north to find some ducks, and so he's heading out as soon as we finish the podcast. So I'm defending you, Jase, that You were so busy putting your hunting stuff together. Apparently, you forgot that we had podcasts this morning. So
forgot his bag, forgot his Bible, but he's got Phil's Bible in front of him.
Look, you can't make this up. I walked behind me. I picked up this Bible, and it was open to John chapter 20.
There you go.
Is that a sign?
See, now who did that? Because I don't recall putting it to John 20, and yet that's exactly where we are today.
Now, having said that, these people that come to me and say, I'm looking for the Lord's will on a daily basis, and they open their Bible, like with their eyes closed.
Yeah,
and they say,
and put their finger in there.
Yeah, and they say, this is where I'm going. There's a thin line between being led by the Spirit of God and being stupid.
So we had now that we got Jase armed and ready, we'll eventually get to our study here in John 20. But I did want a couple of things I was going to ask about is since we were last on air, we had our Robertson Thanksgiving gathering, and a couple of things to report, Zach. Since your family is in North Carolina, so you weren't there. Sometimes you guys are down, but you weren't here this year. And we were missing a few people for different reasons. So we weren't quite as large as normal, which is large because a lot of cousins are there. But one thing was there was a lot made about apparently on the other podcast, because I don't get into such trivial things, of course. But apparently Si had made a big deal about my dressing. I tried Dad's duck and dressing last year, that it was too runny and not enough sage. And so Si launched out this year and did the dressing, and he brings it in. It looked really good. I have to say, a presentation. I looked at it, looked a lot like Dad's. It was in Dad's old pan. And so Si just fixed him a plate of nothing but his dressing, I noticed. And, he's eating it, and I said, well, Si, what about it? I mean, I decided to just put it out there. I hadn't said anything about his dogging of my presentation last year. He said, too runny, not enough sage. I said, well, that seems to be a common theme, Si. That's exactly what you said about mine last year. He said, nope, I missed it. I missed it on this one. So
he missed it.
I doubt he will talk about it since he's the one that failed, but we'll see. Did you try it? I actually tried it. I thought it was pretty good.
He's already told me the same thing. I think he, how Si at this age, he wanted to do it because those ducks came from opening day.
Yeah.
And he basically claimed most of them that he shot.
Somebody asked him on camera how many he had killed. He said, well, at least 4.
And
I said, well, Si, you can only kill 3.
That would be against the law. And, of course, Si responded like he usually does with a, hey, which could mean anything in that context.
That's right. Because no means yes, and yeah means no.
Exactly. So,
but anyway, so that I was going to mention that just because you're probably not going to hear about it on the other podcast. I did not gloat. I did not say anything to Si. I said, well, Si, I thought it was pretty good. And which I did. I thought it was pretty good. So there was that. And then the other thing was Mom, just to give you an update, a lot of you guys pray for Mom, was there in full regalia. She was excited, happy. Mom is doing really well, so well that she's about to move in our little compound, Jay. So we're super excited about that. And thank you for the prayers. She's doing amazing. She seems to sort of have turned a corner and is doing really good. So just to let you guys, contrary to internet reports that have her on her deathbed on a regular occasion, and Jase and Willie hugged into tearful
let's not
embraces.
bring that up again.
She's doing quite well. So, Jase, we've been talking about your theme song, your walk-up song being "I Won't Back Down." You see that you did that the last time you spoke at CR. And it reminded me of our good friends at Family Research Council, because they also know that the opponents of God don't back down either. And there's no doubt, as we kind of look at and see this public life now, we see that you have these people, us, FRC standing for biblical truth, and you kind of got the other side. So that's why Family Research Council is on the front lines. They fight for faith, family, and freedom. They meet with lawmakers. They shape policy. They always keep God's truth in the conversation. And so we want to stand with them. We can't sit it out. We got to act now. Visit frc.org/unashamed to help keep faith alive in America.
Well, I'm headed north, going to Kansas, but our duck season has not been bad. We're not hunting every day. Obviously, it's duck season, and I'm sitting here. But we've had a few signs that I think it's going to be a good duck season. Any workable duck, which has only been a few, they're just coming right into the decoys, which is exciting. I took the LSU baseball player who's now playing professional ball, and I got to take my son Cole. And Al, it was something happened that has never happened to me on the earth in 50 plus years. But I was awakened by my son standing over me, and he was saying, "Dad, it's 4:30. And now I got the baseball player in there, so this is embarrassing. So I look at my phone, and my alarm is going off, but there's no sound coming out of it. So I didn't think anything about it at the time, because I had to get ready in 7 minutes, which I did, and we were not late. But I should have known this morning was going to be challenging just because that happened. There had been a storm, so I thought maybe it had something to do with the storm. But at some point in the duck hunt, I checked my phone, and because my son said, well, your volume probably wasn't up. Well, when I looked at it, my volume was all the way up. And so I'm like, what happened here? And my son, who's very smart, said, well, there's a new dilemma with these Apple phones. You have to turn off your attention surrounding, which I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
And so he said, I watched a video on it. And believe it or not, now, through the power of AI, so if you've had this problem, I'm going to correct this. This is just a PSA. That sensor, if you have it on, it's under your Face ID and attention setting, which I didn't know existed. If you have that enabled, the AI bug in your phone detects whether the surroundings are conducive to make sounds. So now just think about this. So it detected that maybe they should silence it because everything was quiet. Well, that's the reason I want it to go off, because I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
So you have to disable that, and it's like a phenomenon going across the globe. People are having that happen to them. So that's where it started, and that morning hunt, which was okay. I mean, I think we shot 5 ducks, but we had the power company. No power was on at the lair, so we did all this in the dark, getting ready. So then the power trucks decided that the problem was somewhere on our gravel road through our duck hole, and they sent 2 huge trucks and they destroyed our road because it was wet and muddy, and which eventually led them to getting stuck. Well, this is all going on while we're trying to hunt. And I'm like, what would happen? So finally we said, look, we can't hunt while this is going on. You know, they're big white trucks. I mean, think 18-wheelers on a gravel road while I'm trying to hunt.
So, Zach, last year you approached me and you said that a company called PhD Weight Loss was interested in sponsoring the podcast, and they needed a guinea pig from the three of us. And I assume because I was the fattest pig, that's why you called me. Is that correct?
They didn't say guinea pig. They just said that.
I made that up, but they did want to sponsor us, and we're thanking them. We've had a great partnership with PhD Weight Loss. I've lost right at 80 pounds, which was desperately needed. Here's a picture of me, if you're watching this, at the beginning, and then you see me now, obviously right at 80 pounds less, looking much better, feel much better. Meds have been cut, and I walk almost every day around our neighborhood, and I feel really good doing it. So for December only, you can get started. They're adding 2 free weeks to your program just to help you out and get started. Mention the code 2 weeks, and they'll waive your consultation fee and even cover the cost of your food. Call PhD Weight Loss today and breeze into 2026 already working on your goals. You call them at 864-644-1900, or you can visit them at myphdweightloss.com. That's 864-644-1900. Mention the code 2 weeks, or you can visit myphdweightloss.com. If I can do it, if Zach can do it, so can you. Be sure to tell him you heard about it on the Unashamed podcast and get started today.
We get up there. Well, then my Argo goes dead. And in between that, I left out the part where, we were talking about this phone and trying to get it lined out. Well, at some point, I looked around and said, well, I've lost my phone. I can't find it. So they tried to call it. It'd go to voicemail. And so I realized I had put it on the shelf of the blind, and then we saw some ducks. And somewhere in me shooting said ducks, the phone went into the swamp, and I baptized and buried my phone. Yeah. Now look, believe it or not, I got on my hands.
So how does that phone do being baptized? That's what I want.
You know what? There's a resurrection has occurred. Now my case disintegrated. Swamp water and look, this case I had, they said it will last you the rest of your life. It lasted 5 minutes in swamp water, and it literally deteriorated. So that just tells you what's in the water. And the phone, actually, I just took a hairdryer and turned it off. It was submerged for 20 minutes, which they said is not possible. And I took a hairdryer out. The only thing is if I take a selfie, it's foggy. But everything else seems to work fine.
No more selfies.
So anyway, we go up there. Well, then my Argo, or our amphibious vehicle, while talking to the LP&L personnel, wondering, I was imagining what my dad would say, why would 2 grown men, but I didn't say all that. Then it wouldn't crank. Our vehicle wouldn't crank. We had to use their tools to get that going about an hour later. It was just one of those days where nothing went right. And I don't know, it just made me think, no matter what you do, sometimes there's things outside of your control.
So what did the former LSU baseball player think about all that? Did
he pretty much laughed from the start of that till the end. So I think, I have a friend for life, which is what you have to do in those situations. This is part of what my wife calls duck season, the ordeal. It's just all part of it. And if you ask me, was it worth it? I would say yes. I mean, they're gifts of God, and it's just good, clean fun. And it's a great place to talk about Jesus, a duck blind setting.
It was worth it for those 2 gadwall that backpedal right in your decoys.
It was. So we had our first big ducks come in the
story.
decoys, and they like to took our head off, and they just looked. They were hovering over the waters, which reminds me of Genesis 1 in creation. the Spirit was hovering over the waters, and then God said, and it burst forth. And so same kind of concept. It's a good reminder, because then I say, cut them.
Cut them.
And new creations are formed, which results in duck gumbos and duck and dressing.
But not enough sage and too runny.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. We're living in a world where you look around and you're like, well, where is God in all this? But he does his greatest work in the struggle. So I actually used that day that was difficult as a theme. I preached last night at the Hub. It was quite the raucous crowd. There was a big contingent from the Celebrate Recovery House from somewhere.
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah, it was vocal and boisterous. And
that crew always brings some excitement to the audience, no doubt about it.
They're a shout back crew. That's what you call
Yeah.
them. They shout back when you're preaching. They'll shout at you. That's what you want.
So the theme was kind of the resurrection. That's where we're at in John 20. But I was talking about Jesus being king. And just kind of this reality, this present reality that we're reigning on the earth. The kingdom has taken a form on earth as it is in heaven through Spirit-filled people, which it was real quiet during that part. And I just think people are not getting that from the Bible, which is why we're here.
Yeah, Jase, I was going to tell you, I agree, man. I think I think we've missed that as a church, and this idea that the role or the vocation of humanity as ordained by God, it is to exercise dominion over the earth. And I was just with Fred this morning, taking him to school, and I'm trying to give him like little nuggets every morning, like they got 15 minutes in the car with him. I want to make the most of it. And I was asking him about, what were you created for? And he was like, I don't know. He's 14, so he's like, oh no. And I'm like, no, but you know what were you created for? And he, of course, gave the church answer, glorify God. And I said, well, how do you do that? I think he said follow God. He said it's just to follow God. I said, but follow, what does that mean? He's like, follow him. Like, but what does it mean to follow him? He's like, to follow? I was like, no, you're answering you're repeating what does it mean to actually follow God? And he's like, I guess do what he does. I was like, well, what does he do? And we went through this whole exercise, and essentially we got to the end of it. He's like, God makes stuff. He creates things. He exercises dominion, and I don't know if he used that language, dominion, but my point to him was that's what you're called to do. That's your vocation. And when you sin, you're actually abdicating, or you're not exercising dominion. And I actually think this is one of the most misunderstood things about the story of the Bible is we don't really know what that means. But I pulled up, it's funny you mentioned that, because I pulled up a list of probably 15 verses in the book of Genesis that essentially say the same exact thing throughout. So if you read the book of Genesis and you like skim through it, that's essentially what you're going to get to. The first one is in Genesis. I won't read them all, but I just want to skim through them real quick. The first one is in Genesis 1:28 when it said God blessed them, and he said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over every living creature that moves along the earth. So the idea was be fruitful, multiply, exercise dominion, subdue the earth. Like take the garden, expand it across the entire globe. Then the world gets wicked, and the whole scene happens where God floods the earth in the days of Noah. And then when those 8 people were coming off that ark, guess what God told them in Genesis 9:1? And God blessed Noah and his sons, and he said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So it's the same repetition. Then in Genesis 9:7, and you be fruitful and multiply and increase greatly on the earth and multiply in it. Then you get Genesis 12 after the Tower of Babel, when he's calls Abram out and calls Israel. And listen to what he says to Abram. I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So you keep seeing these families expanding across the entire globe. Genesis 17, that I make my covenant between you and me and you, and may multiply you greatly. Genesis 17:6, I will make you exceedingly fruitful. Be fruitful and multiply. I will make you into many nations. And it just goes on throughout the entire book of Genesis. It's the same repetition of be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth and have dominion over it. It's some version of that. And what's interesting about that is we just finished our study on the book of Exodus. And when I went back and read the very first 8 verses of the book of Exodus, you know how they end, and the reason why Pharaoh got mad and the reason why he was persecuting the Hebrews is it says here in verse 7 that he said, come, we must do, hold on, let me back up here. In verse 6, he says, now Joseph and all of his brothers and all that generation died, because remember that's how the book of Genesis ends, with the story of Joseph. But the Israelites were exceedingly fruitful, and they multiplied greatly and increased in numbers and became so numerous that the land was filled with them. So you see that story, it goes right into the Exodus story, and somehow, I don't know how it happened, but with thousands of years of biblical history, the church has forgotten that this was what the whole thing was about in the first place. It's wild.
Yeah, and it also shows you, Zach, to the point I was making a minute ago, that the enemies of God are also seem to be lined up against this idea of multiplication, subduing the earth, doing what God created us to do as well, which is kind of interesting. There's always been that antithesis that seems to go against exactly what God has called us to do. And maybe that's one of the reasons why it's easy for the church to get blinded to that and to miss it and miss the idea. Because everything you just mentioned all through the book of Genesis, all those patriarchs was building the people of God that one day would become a nation, that one day would produce the Messiah. The whole idea was to get the king here. That was the whole process was all of this idea was to get him here.
Anybody that's still hunting for the right gift for Christmas, time's running out, but I want to tell you about Aura Frames. They make it look like you planned all year long to get this. Al, I think you have one of these at your house.
I have one at the Southern Lair, Zach, and it is one of my favorite things to do because Alex will upload fresh pictures of my grandkids, and so when we're down at the Southern Lair, I get to see them and see them grow up, and it's fantastic. I love it.
I mean, it really is a cool idea because think about a traditional picture frame. You got one picture, it sits there for the rest of your life. This is different. You can personalize your gift by adding a message before it arrives. You can share photos and videos effortlessly straight from your phone. I love the fact that you can upload these all year long and keep those grandparents happy as you send pictures of your kids to them. I know I'm going to be getting this from my in-laws this year and my dad as well. So for a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver mat frames, named the #1 by Wirecutter using our promo code Unashamed at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code Unashamed. The deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast. So order yours now and get it in just in time for the holidays. And support our show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. And this is so key for where we're at in our cultural moment because I was just reading, I actually preached a sermon on this a couple weeks ago, and I'll try to put it in the show notes if I can find the link. But Elon Musk, just in the last several weeks, he said and has predicted that with the advancements of AI, that within the next 10 to 20 years, that work will be obsolete. Like we will not have to work anymore. Like he said something to the effect of, sure, you can work if you want, but it's going to be like growing tomatoes in the backyard. You can if you want to, but you don't have to because you can go down to the store and just pick them up. And when I was reading that and trying to imagine a world where there is no work, I'm like, that is not the picture of the kingdom. So whatever vision of utopia that's being propagated by Elon Musk and the like, that's not the vision of the kingdom of God. Like work is actually a blessing. And I think that what's going to be recovered, and I think you're going to see this, by the way, I'm not worried about that world because I think the kingdom of God, I do believe it is a kingdom that can't be shaken nor destroyed. But it is going to be interesting that I think there's going to be two worlds that are they're going to become very, very clear. One world will be completely automated, and then one world will be I think the people of God. We're not going to abdicate our dominion and hand it over to technology and things like that. But I thought that was interesting that that's where we're at. This idea of dominion, work, cultivation. Now we're being told, no, you don't have to do any of that. That's we'll take care of that for you. Technology will.
Well, what's amazing is so this morning when I woke up, I had little man, so I was getting up early. But one of the guys I'm helping to disciple via the technological world, he sent me a text deep into the night. He was like, sorry for so late. But he said, I was reading Psalm 24, and I'm kind of confused on the true meaning of verses 7 through 10. I looked it up, but it just threw a bunch of interpretations at me, and I just don't want to misinterpret the scriptures. So I read Psalm 24, and Zach, it was exactly what you just addressed, which I find fascinating. And you got to remember, this guy's new in the faith. But I want to read this because it's kind of what I preached last night about why is Jesus king? It says in verse 1, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. For he founded it upon the seas and established it upon the waters. So we're going back to Genesis 1 and 2, and humans were created in the image of God. And Zach's right. Twice it says, let them rule over, and let Adam work in the garden. He was to rule and work. Then verse 3 says, who may ascend the hill of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not lift up his soul to an idol or swear by what is false. He will receive blessing from the Lord and vindication from God his Savior. Such is the generation of those who seek him. So he gets to verse 7. So these are the next three are the question. And watch what it says. Lift up your heads, O you gates, be lifted up, you ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O you gates, lift them up, you ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is he, this King of glory? The Lord Almighty. He is the King of glory. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, why would a young Christian have trouble understanding what this is talking about? Because I think it's right where we left off in the story in John. He doesn't look like a king in the way he's operated up until now. He has no money, he has no power, he has no house, he has a bunch of riffraff people. He was born on the wrong side of town, which he has no pedigree. Everybody is, threatened by him, despite the fact that he seems to just be concerned about the lowly and helping people, but he's not pushing back. Because when you think kingdom and king, you're and ruling, you're thinking power, battle, swords, tanks, and swords in their day, tanks in our days, dropping bombs, and whoever has the biggest stick is the one dictating policy. And so I think you see that his glory was hidden on the cross, because here he is being made fun of. They've dressed him up like a king with a crown of thorns, and they're asking him questions, but he just doesn't seem to be pushing back whatsoever. So I think that's when you combine that with what's going on in the world, what we see, people tend to think there's no king.
It's a misunderstanding of dominion for sure. I think the world would perceive dominion, as you said, as domination, as like coming and exercising power over, which is kind of interesting. The story of Jesus, right? Because on the Mount of Transfiguration, when Jesus is talking with Moses and Elijah about his departure, he's talking about the fact that I'm going to depart this earth and leave. And Peter is like looking at the transfigured Christ in his glory, And you got to think like Peter. You see this with Peter throughout the whole like gospel, right? That whole scene where Jesus says, "Who do you say I am?" Who do people say I am? Some people say you're John the Baptist. Some people say you're Elijah. Some say it's one of the other prophets. Peter, who do you say I am? And Peter rightly says you're the Christ. And Jesus says, on this rock, I'm going to build my church, and the gates of hell won't prevail against it. But then he predicts his death, and Peter's like, no. That ain't how this is going to play out. Like, no, you're not going to die. And Christ has to rebuke Peter and says, get behind me, Satan. Then on the transfiguration, Peter, again, he misses it. The account in Luke says he doesn't understand what's happening. And so he's like, let me build tents for you guys so that I can house you. And the Father shows up in a cloud of smoke and says, no, that's not how this works. Listen to him. This is the Christ, my son. Listen to him. Do what he says. Then again, Jesus predicts his death. The Son of Man must be handed over to the hands of men. And they don't get that the way to dominion is actually through the cross. It's actually through sacrifice. That's actually the way. And I think that's why we probably don't teach a lot on dominion theology, is because it's hard for us to wrap our mind around the fact that the way that Jesus exercised dominion was on a road to a cross where he suffered at the hands of men and was mocked and scorned and ultimately was murdered. Now, he did sit in a grave for 3 days, but God raised him up on the third day, and then he ascended. He departed this earth, just like he was talking to Moses and Elijah about on the Mount of Transfiguration. But I think it's that cross is the thing that people, it's you kind of want to get away from that. And it's kind of like we're saying, give me a dominion without the cross.
But even the life of Jesus, when you think about it, what people fear is what they truly believe deep down. Because when Jesus came to the earth, you couldn't find any more humble circumstances by which it happened. It certainly didn't seem like a king being born in a manger because he couldn't find a room. His parents couldn't find a room from these two people that were not even in their hometown. And yet what was going on politically? King Herod was going to kill all the babies, and did kill many who were the age of Jesus, because he was fearful that a king was being born that would threaten his kingdom, which was a mockery anyway. And then you get to the end of Jesus' life, 33 years later, and here's Pilate, who is the ruling authority, the governor from Rome over this area. And we know, because we just studied it in 18 and 19, he was fearful because Jesus was called the Son of God. So somewhere deep down, Pilate was thinking, what if he is the Son of God? What if he really is deity? So even in the circumstances and setting of Jesus coming to earth, the life he lived, what he did when he was here, the 3 years of his ministry, and then even his suffering and death, there was fear by authorities on what if he really is who he says he is. And of course, we believe that he was. Yeah. Which is exactly why we're still preaching all these years later. I find it fascinating, Jase, because I'm going to be preaching about Jesus King this Sunday as well. We're kind of we're tracking on the same wavelength. Yeah. I find it fascinating that in our culture right now, as we sit here having this discussion, I looked it up yesterday because I've been hearing this no kings. And I realize it's a anti-Trump, but I went to I looked a couple of their websites up yesterday, and they're very prolific. No thrones, no crowns, no kings. And the whole thing is aimed at our president, Trump, who's not a king. He's a president. He was elected. But anyway, so they're saying this. And I thought, isn't it interesting that we have millions of people saying the last thing we need is a king, and we're on this podcast saying it's the first thing we need is the king.
So here's the hard, cold truth that microplastics, they're infiltrating every part of our lives, believe it or not. Scientists estimate that we now consume up to a credit card worth of plastic every single week through our food, our water, and even the air that we breathe in. And these microplastics, they enter your bloodstream, they alter your gut bacteria, which weakens your immune system, and it raises your risk of disease. And some microplastics can even mimic hormones or damage your DNA. Even if you eat clean or avoid packaged food, you're still being exposed. But your gut can help fight back, and I want to tell you about how we're doing that with Kimchi One from Bright Core Nutrition. It's a potent ally in this toxic world. It's packed with over 900 probiotic strains unique to kimchi, and that helps you detox from the inside out, and the way it does that is it helps support digestion It helps protect your cells, your brain, your hormones, and your future. Your body was never designed to handle plastics, but your gut was designed to protect you. You just have to give it the right tools. Al, you've been taking Kimchi 1, correct?
I have, and it's really helped me. I don't have to take fiber anymore because I'm taking this product. And I don't know how to say this nicely, but it helps me be regular, and it helps my gut in many, many ways. So I love the product.
Yeah, I mean, really, all health does begin in the gut. And so today, you can get 25% off with our code Unashamed by clicking the link below. Or for an even better deal, call my friends at Brightcore for up to 50% off your first order and free shipping. So give them a call now at 888-404-9677 or visit mybrightcore.com/unashamed.
Al, that's where I started my sermon last night. I told that story. If I had my notes, I could remember it. Maybe I can't off the top of my head, but I was like, there was a resurgence in against royalty. I mean, obviously, that's how this country was formed. Sure. In opposition of being under some king or being under British rule. I mean, I've told the story before. The first coin minted in America, which I was fortunate to find this treasure in Maryland, was a 1651 Massachusetts pine shilling. And the reason it had 1651 on it was because that was the only year that Britain didn't have a king. So a bunch of Americans in the years of 1670 to 1684 said, we want our own money. We want to be free. So they minted this coin illegally, but put 1651 on it. So if they got caught with it, they'd say, oh, well, we did this the year.
King.
Yeah, you had no king. I mean, it's an incredible story. But I told the story in 1919, the mayor of Milwaukee, I think his name was like Don Hone or something like that. You can look it up. But the King of Belgium wanted to visit for some odd reason. And this mayor wrote, and it was a political letter, but he basically came up with a famous line that said, no, you're not welcome, because to hell with royalty. That was his line. He said, I'm for the working man. I'm for the simple man. And you know, that resonates with people because we want to be free from this kind of rule. So it makes you think of, well, what is the problem with the king, having a king on earth? Well, it's a short list. They're all flawed. They're all unpredictable. They all die.
Yeah.
And then it's unpredictable on who's going to carry the line. All you got to do is get one bad king, and they'll wipe you out. Which, by the way, Jase, over and over.
That short list you mentioned is in the Bible by God Himself on why you don't want a king on earth.
He told Israel, you don't want a king. But what's funny is these protesters, though, what they're actually saying is no king but our king. I mean, if their guy's in, then they're excited about it. But I actually think the premise there, us conservatives, we do need to take note of that. Like,
yeah, sure.
Like, I mean, I'm not putting all my eggs in the Trump basket, and if that offends you, I'm sorry, but I'm not putting I'm saying no king but the king, and I think that is important because when you go back and look at the founding of this country, I don't know how this is controversial today, and I know people get mad when I say this on the podcast, but it's true. Like, conservative humanism is still humanism. The king is King Jesus, and so if you look at the foundation of the country, like you look at the French Revolution. That was they rightly revolted against the monarchy during the French Revolution. I mean, it was absolute insanity of how oppressive the regime was. King Louis and Maria Antoinette. And so the people do accurately and I think justifiably revolt on some level. But then when you read about the revolt, it gets pretty sick what they actually did. And so they didn't have it. Then it got total anarchy, complete and utter chaos, because they kicked out the king. They said, we don't want the royalty. It became a populist uprising is what it was. They gained power, and it was led by a guy named Maximilien Robespierre. And then they became so paranoid that they get out the guillotine, and I mean, they're chopping off everybody's head. Anybody that was a threat to the revolution, they would chop their head off. And then the guy who started the revolution, guess what happened to him? He ends up getting his head chopped off. And then that paved the way for another king, Napoleon Bonaparte, who was a brutal dictator. And so all of these systems, like, you think they're going to work politically, and so you put your eggs in the basket of the politician. The problem is, if the politician, if the actual system of government, if it isn't predicated on the king, a non-arbitrary anchor to reality, if it's dependent on our will, our collective wills, or whatever, some arbitrary thing, it's going to end in tyranny. That's why these people that are pushing back against quote unquote Christian nationalism, I'm like, man, I want a country that's predicated on the fact that all men are created equal, that all men are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. I mean, that's the idea that actually led to the abolishment of slavery. That's the idea that led to the end of the civil rights movement. That's the idea that led to the birth of this country. That is a primarily Christian idea. And so if you leave that's what the thing is based on. So when we say no king but the king, what we're saying is we want to come under that truth of what God says and not what.
Yeah, but my problem is that they're leaving off the king. That with
Well,
this
they're
whole
leaving off
idea.
the king.
Here's why. So I think the most famous verse quoted in the Bible is John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. But I think most people are just focused on the cross. But, obviously Paul, when he has his little riff in 1 Corinthians 15, he's like, if Christ hasn't been raised, you're still in your sins.
Yeah.
Your faith is futile. It doesn't end at the cross. When he says it's finished, that's why we link that to the first creation, when God said, it's finished, it's done, and then he rested. So now, let's see what I've created reflect my image. Well, the same thing happened when Jesus was raised from the dead. It's called the new creation on this planet. It's where heaven and earth meet. It's where humans and God meet in Jesus. So I want to illustrate that, and I found this quite comical because I'm using Phil's Bible, and he's literally speaking from the grave here because he has notes on Psalms 2. And what's fascinating is that psalm is quoted numerous times in the New Testament.
Yeah.
But I want to read something that Phil discovered that I found fascinating. And I went here because I knew it talked about kings, so you'll see why I did this. But in Psalm 2, it says, why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? Which is a good question. Where's God on all this? Why is everybody against each other? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers gather together against the Lord and against his anointed one. So that's why David said a long time ago, the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain, because the kings of the earth take their stand and the rulers gather together against the Lord and against his anointed one. Let us break their chains, they say, and throw off their fetters. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. And my dad put out in the margin, God laughs. It's a good question. Does God laugh? Look, and he put 5 verses where it also says that he laughs. Psalm 2:4, Psalm 37:13, Psalm 59:8, Proverbs maybe 1:26 or 3:26, and then Proverbs 3:34. But on that 37:13, he said, look at this. So I went over there and looked, and it said, the wicked plot against the righteous and gnash their teeth at them, but the Lord laughs at the wicked, for he knows their day is coming. So, which I've heard my dad say that many times. So let me continue. The one enthroned in heaven laughs, the Lord scoffs at them. Then he rebukes them in his anger and terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will proclaim the decree of the Lord. Now, here's where it gets interesting. He says, you are my begotten son. Now, some translations leave out begotten because I think they thought, well, he must be mistaken, but it's in there.
So by 2050, more than a third of the world's young people, check this out, they're going to live in Africa, while less than 4% will live here in North America. So entire nations will be shaped by the children who are growing up today. And we've been involved in ministry in Africa.
Oh man, I was very young the first time I went to the continent, and every experience I've had has been amazing with the people I've met there and the believers that are there.
Yeah, so that's why we love our friends at Tomorrow Clubs, because they're stepping up to ensure that the next generation in Zimbabwe, for example, is discipled by the church and not the world. And today we're helping them focus on one of the greatest opportunities that we have is the Binga district, which is one of the most isolated and disadvantaged regions in Zimbabwe. And now local churches are discipling thousands every single week. 40 more villages, though, are asking for Tomorrow Club support, and we want to help them reach 5,000 kids in these villages before the end of the year, and you can be a part of shaping the church of tomorrow. $100, it trains a Tomorrow Club's leader, just $100. $250 covers a one-time cost to equip a local church. And if God places it on your heart, you can sponsor an entire community for just $2,000, which will launch and sustain the ministry in a new community for an entire year. But any amount will help, and every gift is matched for a limited time so you can double your impact. Join the Binga Blitz at tomorrowclubs.org/unashamed. That's tomorrowclubs.org/unashamed.
But look, it's in the context of the resurrection, and I'm going to prove that to you. It says, today I have become your father. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will rule them with an iron scepter. You will dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise, be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and you be destroyed in your way, for his wrath can flare up in a moment. So did you know that psalm is quoted in Acts 13? And I want to read to you where it's quoted, and you tell me what the context of the begotten Son is here. This is 13:32. We tell you the good news, what God promised our fathers. He has fulfilled for us, their children, by raising up Jesus. As it is written in the second psalm, you are my begotten son. Today I have become your father. The fact that God raised him from the dead, never to see decay, is stated in these words. I will give you the holy and sure blessings promised to David. So it is stated elsewhere, which is, I believe, where's that psalm? You will not let your Holy One decay.
Yeah,
that's Psalm 16.
In Acts 2, that's quoted as well.
That's right. Where you wouldn't, and you need to read Psalm 16 right now if you're listening, and then come back, push pause. But then also, look, you know where else it's quoted is in Hebrews 1. On now God speaks, and when you read Hebrews 1. It immediately goes to where he gets his authority as being the exalted king at the right hand of God. He's the exact, verse 3, the exact representation of his being. After he provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven and became much more superior. So then he gets to verse 5. There it is. There's that same quote. You are my begotten son. Today I have become your father, and I will be his father, and he will be my son. Let all the angels worship him. And so what I find fascinating is when you throw in Romans 1, speaking of David, who is now writing this in the Psalms and Jesus fulfilling it, it says the same thing in the first 4 verses when he says, Jesus called to be an apostle and set apart for the gospel he promised beforehand through his holy scriptures, which is what we're reading, regarding his son, as to his human nature was a descendant of David, and who through the Spirit of holiness was declared with power to be the Son of God. That's power. That always has that king connotation to it. Son of God by his resurrection from the dead, Jesus Christ our Lord. So the last one I'll read after all this about the kings is, and this is what I did last night in my sermon, so I just can't help it. I read, what I did in the sermon is I read 2 Corinthians 5 because they're doing a series on ministry, and I made the point that ministry for Jesus is not something we come up with, it's who we are. And I read 2 Corinthians 5 where it says, we are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. And that ambassador has that royal connotation. We're representing heaven and the authority Jesus has at the right hand of God. And so I went through that whole chapter. But then I read Revelation 1, which I want to read this. I think it makes everything we've talked about come together. John, to the 7 churches, he says, grace and peace, this is verse 4, to you from who is and who was and who is to come, from the sevenfold Spirit. And I made a point about this being a present reality. Yes, we will be resurrected bodily in the end and live forever. But Jesus is. He was, he is, and he is to come before his throne. And from Jesus Christ, who is the faithful witness, the firstborn from the dead. There's that begotten. He's the firstborn from the dead, Psalm 2. And the ruler of the kings of the earth. And this is where I really preached on, because these 3 things about who we are connects us with that royalty, being ambassadors. To him who loves us, there's the cross, there's the life, and has freed us, there's the death on a cross and the resurrection, from our sins by his blood, and has made us, there's the new creation, 2 Corinthians 5 again, to be a kingdom and priests, to serve his God and Father. To him be glory and power forever and ever. Amen. And then he quotes Daniel 7. Look, he's coming with the clouds. And then when you go to verse 13, he references the Son of Man. I saw one like the Son of Man. And why was he coming on the clouds and one like the Son of Man? And then he quotes Jesus himself in 17 and 18. He says, I am the first, the last, I'm the living one. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forever and ever. I hold the keys of death and Hades. And that's why he's the King of Kings.
And it's the perfect, we're almost out of time, but it's the perfect setup for exactly where we are in John 20 with the resurrection. Because, you coronate a king. There's a coronation. There's a big celebration of how, this person became the king. It's usually on earthly kings. It's the passing of the torch because the, former king or queen has died, and now the royal line has now continued on. What you're saying, what you just read in those string of texts, Jase, that were from Psalms and the New Testament, and eventually in Revelation, shows us that the coronation of our king was the resurrection.
Yes.
No doubt about it.
Well, and it's connected to this idea of dominion, because when you get to, you just read that verse about Jesus's body was not left to decay. Then you read Romans 8, and it talks about the creation, which we're supposed to exercise dominion over. And what does it say about the creation? That the creation groans with eager expectation, waiting for the sons of God to be revealed, because the creation itself is going to be liberated from its bondage to decay as we actually exercise dominion with it in it. So then what you're going to see at the resurrection of our bodies is we're actually going to fulfill what Christ said to do in Genesis 1:28. We're gonna do that. And so the reason why this begins at the resurrection is because Jesus is the first part of the creation to be, in terms of a human. His created body is liberated from its bondage to decay, which is a foretaste of our bodies and the entire creation itself. So that's kind of an interesting thought to think about, that the ground that was cursed is now like, please, can we get to the point where you humans are liberated so that you can cultivate the earth and turn this into the garden?
I love it. All right, we're out of time, but Jase, I like that. Loves us, freed us, made us. That'll preach right there.
Those points are just right there. I didn't make that up. That's what it says.
Yeah, that's gold. That may surface again in my sermon this week. We'll see. So we'll hit into John 20 next time on Unashamed.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube. And be sure to click the little bell and choose all notifications to watch every episode.